welcome to Vulcan's Football 2015 and it's hard to believe I'm saying this, the last week of the regular season of the 2015 football season. It goes quick. I'm your host, Gary Smith. I'm joined once again, as always, by California Sports Information Director Matt Kiefer. Matt, it seems just like literally last week we were talking about how long of a trip it's going to be to Virginia State to start the season. It was about 90 degrees. And here we are now, in a blink of an eye. The conference season's over. We're in the last weekend of the regular season playing Lock Haven. It just goes faster and faster every year.
11 weeks definitely does not seem like it's been that amount of time. It feels like we were just in the middle of PSAC West play, and now it's already over after last week's contest with Mercyhurst. You'd love to be playing the conference title game, but you still, at this point in the season, they have everything to play for. Chance for regional playoffs, which I'm sure will be much of our discussion today, at stake here this Saturday.
It's been an exciting season all around the PSAC and the Super Region 1 and NCAA Division 2, and we'll get to that, as Matt said, in the second half of our show. But first, we're going to put a bow on the final week of the PSAC West Divisional play last Saturday at Adamson Stadium. Man, it was senior night, senior day, senior afternoon. No rain for one of the few times this year, so you didn't have to bring an umbrella to Adamson Stadium. But it was a good performance for a couple of the seniors for California playing their last home game at Adamson Stadium.
It wasn't a huge senior class. There was only about 9 guys there, but still, they made the most of it. First play of the game, one senior connects for the sophomore for a touchdown. You take that every time. A bunch of big plays, block punts, interception returns by seniors, big catches by Quan Scott on the outside. The O-line guys doing what they do every week, providing rushing lanes and also giving Harris enough time to pass.
And also the defense. I mean, in today's college game, you're never going to see the days back in the 1950s where teams are winning games 3-0. Not a lot of shutouts, but the Vulcan defense really stood pat. I think in the first half, we were talking about it at halftime, Mercyhurst had about, 14, 15 plays inside the 5-yard line and didn't score points.
It's one of those things there. I mean, it's been Mercer's got the field goal early on, and I was like, okay, are they going to take the points or they take it off? In the press box, we're like, we'd probably keep the points the way the game's going right now, but they took the points off, and sure enough, they kept us basically were shut out in the first quarter. They got a touchdown in the second quarter, third quarter, and then their backup came in. But again, it was one of those games, opening play, you score a touchdown, you feel pretty comfortable, especially when you block the ensuing drive's field goal, that you're going to be in control most of the day. And that's pretty much what it was for the Vulcans.
It was the second week in a row. California gets off to a big start because last week against Gannon, I think it wasn't the first play. It was very early on. They scored a touchdown, forced a turnover, and scored another touchdown. So if you're 5 minutes late to a California game, you're missing maybe 14 points. But in that game, it was exactly what California needed to do. They needed to take care of business against Mercyhurst, a team that they have not had a lot of success in the last couple years. Just a nice grinded-out game, got the win, and going into the final week this week, like you said, everything's to play for.
It's one of those things you look at the schedule. Okay, Mercyhurst is maybe a 500 team, something like that, but it's a team they won 4 of the last 5 times against the Vulcans. They've won at Adamson Stadium before. They're especially tough at home, but they were playing with the backup quarterback, and then again midway through late in the fourth quarter, I think it was, their quarterback went down with an injury after a hard hit on a blitz by a cornerback, and they brought in a third-string quarterback. So at that point, you're just really basically appreciating for what they're doing. But you saw they were down 21-7. The game plan didn't change. They're still running the ball. Brandon Brown-Dukes and Richie Sanders, I think 2 of the guys who've probably been around the PSAC the longest, it seems like, at the tailback position. They put up nice numbers, but again, they were getting between the 20 and 20s. Maybe they get inside the 10, but they weren't punching it in early on. And then once the backup quarterback comes in, okay, you give up those yards because you're still playing the numbers game. It's like, okay, how many possessions do they have left? Given their offense, you give them credit. They never veered off. Their offense never went no huddle. They didn't really start throwing the ball every single drive. They still ran the ball almost primarily throughout the game, and they held an amazing time of possession advantage. And the Vulcans still outgained them, but it's one of those things, how many numbers of plays they ran, how long they had the ball, and how few penalties they had. On paper, Mercer should have won that game. You look at those major numbers, but the big strike ability of the Vulcans and being able to come up in the clutch on special teams and on defense was the difference.
Yeah, we were talking at halftime. We were putting the halftime stats in the graphics, and you see the time of possession. I think it was something like 21-9 maybe in favor of Mercyhurst. But California in that first half, they had first play of the game was about a 70-yard play, 75, 80-yard play, whatever it was, and then there was another couple long runs, couple long passes. So they were getting their plays in bunches, and then after they got up, good job of California just kind of using the old wrestling terminology, putting a rest hold on, running the clock, running the ball, taking out the clock, not risking anything because the only way that Mercer is going to win is if you keep giving the ball back. So a great game plan by California just to do what they needed to do to get that win and move on.
Coach Keller said in the post-game interviews he couldn't remember the last game he had and called that they only had 6 offensive possessions. True, they had 8, but 2 of those were at the end of the half, so he's just taking these, so you really don't even equate to those. And 5 of the 6 led the points, and the 1 was a turnover on downs. Close to the red zone, it was one of those things, okay, if you get the touchdown, you run some more clock off, and you stretch the lead a little bit, so you don't fault them for going for it there on the 4th down. But they only have 6 possessions and still score 31 points. That's an incredible, efficient day for your offense. And then on defense, I mean, the bend but don't break defense they've been doing, and even making a pick at the end of there just to really quench all chances, and even though it was still 10 points. But it's been great to see a senior make that pick and make that huge return.
And he was, you'll see in the highlights, the pick at the end of the game. Almost one more move, I think we'd have had it. But special teams again, it seems like we talk about at least, I know last year we did every week because there was a stretch where California was blocking kicks, but last couple weeks, California special teams keeping points off the board with block kicks, and that's a huge part of the game this time of year.
I mean, it's one of those things, it's a 3 parts facet of the game, basically, our offense, defense, and special teams. Vulcans continue to put out starters on offense and defense on that unit, where some teams maybe go more secondary kind of players, something like that. Vulcans with Larry Wilson, they always put out their best players, not afraid of what may happen with injuries, and they go after it more times than not, and they're successful, almost more than anyone else is in the league over the last probably 5 to 6 years, you'd have to say. But first block, Chaz Veal, great to see you get the ball back there. And then the second one, you take that after they've already made a field goal. Jordan Lardani actually got the block. I watched some film today. So great job there in the interior getting it, where Chaz was more just on the outside, just a speed rush.
Well, that pretty much wraps up everything we can verbally say about the game from this past Saturday. So it's time to roll the highlights from this past weekend's win against the Mercier's Lakers. And then after the break, we will talk about the Lock game. There's no highlights from last year's game as CUTV was doing the PSAC championship game up at Slippery Rock, but we'll break down everything Lock Haven, PSAC standings, PSAC schedules, Super Region standings and schedules, and more. So stick around, because there's a lot of ground to cover. And you're watching Vulcans Football 2015 right here on CUTV.
3 receivers to the near side. He's going to fake that way, go towards the middle of the field. He has Luke Smorey over the middle. He shakes off his defender, keeps on his feet. It looks like he has room going all the way down the field, down to the 10, 5, and right off the bat on the first play of the game, the Vulcans getting a touchdown. Condis going to attempt a field goal right here, and it is blocked right here by the Vulcans. The kick is going to be up, and it is going to be good. This one is going to be blocked again by the Vulcans. It is blocked off the bottom of the field goal post. And Harris is going to hand it off to Franklin, and he extends his streak. Didn't even get touched as he walks into the end zone, and the Vulcans get back on the board again. So second and goal from the 8. They fake the handoff. Rolling out is Emmerich. He goes towards the end zone. And this one is caught, and it is a touchdown. Mercyhurst. Harris gonna go back to pass towards the corner of the end zone. This one is there to Gary Brown. It is caught for the touchdown. Weaver fakes the handoff, back to pass towards the corner of the end zone, and it is caught. Jaquan Williams with the touchdown reception. Harris giving it to Franklin. Franklin following his blocks, and he's gonna get to the corner of the end zone. Touchdown for the Vulcans. The I formation hands it off right here. Robinson fighting and following his blocks into the end zone. Touchdown, Mercyhurst. He's going back to pass, rolling out toward his right. Pressure's coming. He's hit as he throws, and it is intercepted. And that is Chaz Veal on senior day making the interception. Running as fast as he can down the field. Gets away from a defender. Keeps rolling down to the 15, 10, 5, and he gets tackled down. Almost got a touchdown.
The time is now, the place is here. Stop running, face your fear. When it all comes down to this, you only get one shot, can't afford to miss. The time is now, the place is here. Stop running, face your fear. When it all comes down to this, you only get one shot, can't afford to miss. So, let's get it, let's go. Go hard and go home.
Since Since 1937, the Student Association Incorporated, known as SAI, has served the Cal U student body by providing activities, programs, and services. Every enrolled student has the ability to take part in over 125 different clubs and organizations. Managing participation in every SAI activity is easy with OrgSync, a powerful tool for staying connected. Located 1 mile from campus, the SAI Farm has 94 acres of meeting and recreational space. SAI, it's your student association. For almost 30 years, CUTV has been the campus and community home for local news, sports, and entertainment. Broadcast in 100,000 homes in southwestern Pennsylvania, CUTV provides complete coverage of Vulcan sports as well as high school football coverage. Broadcast weekly live, CUTV News Center provides coverage of local and campus events, weekend weather, sports highlights, and feature stories. For more information on CUTV, check us out on the web, friend us on Facebook, or follow us on Twitter.
And welcome back to Vulcan's Football 2015. Once again, I'm your host, Gary Smith, joined by Sports Information Director Matt Keifer. And if you're just joining us, we talked in the first half of the show about the Mercyhurst victory that California had this past Saturday on senior night. And now we get to look ahead to the final week of the regular season. And it's a familiar opponent, but an opponent we don't really play that much anymore because of realignment in the conference. Lock Haven, for years, Lock Haven was in the PSAC West. Know that drive very well through the center part of the state. And it's a great place to watch a football game with the Susquehanna River. But Matt, Lock Haven team seems like, at least for the past decade, has been perennially trying to rebuild.
Seems like every 2 or 3 years they get a new coach in, maybe get a couple wins, maybe see some improvement there in depth or something like that, and then they get another opportunity. That's the case this year. Another first-time head coach. He came from Urbana in Ohio at the Mountain East. So it's a guy who's familiar with Super Region 1, but again, Lock Haven's one of those jobs. It's a tough place to really get to win. They're getting some other sports, but football's just one of those sports that just seemingly can't get over that threshold there. It's nice with Cheney in that division. They always get a win. Millersville's really been struggling, maybe more so than Lock Haven the last 5 years, so that's a second win for them. But they have a good quarterback who's put up some good numbers this year. He's put over 2,000 yards up. He's a returning starter, Caleb Walton, one of those guys you have to pay attention to. And also they have a couple running backs that have got some good yardage this year, sort of splitting the duties almost like the Cal is. And almost everybody seems in the league except maybe Slippery Rock and even Bloomsburg. But they're an offense that you need to win this week, a lot on the line. It's one on paper, it'd be one of those like, okay, 2-touchdown game, but you have to make sure you win, and you win impressively with the regional rankings. It's just much like D1 with the new committee. Impressive wins are important, especially road wins the last week of the year. You got to make a statement. And for Kawan Scott going into this game, he's only 9 yards shy of breaking the all-time record for receiving yards. It'd be nice for him to break that. Maybe his last regular season game. Hopefully he has another one after that. But it's one that's been standing since Perry Kemp was here, and we all know how long that's been. But Gary Brown's nipping on his heels. So Perry had it for 30 years. Kawan might get it for 1 year to borrow it, and then Gary be looking odds-on favorite next year to break it. But again, as of right now, Kawan's on pace for that record.
And that was something whenever I was looking at your game notes, when you put the couple categories that players are starting to creep up, you know, the way the football game has changed in the college level in the past 25 years, a lot more passing, you figure that would be a record that would have been broken long ago. And Perry Kemp was a great player, Hall of Famer, NFL player. But you know, it just goes to show how good he was, and especially with the talent we've had in the past decade or so, that record has stood.
I mean, you look at our wide receivers we've had in the past, it's been like Marcel Pastano, A.J. Jackson, Terrence Moore. Ched Cherry was a 4-year guy, but he didn't really develop into that main guy until his second or third year with the program. Thomas Mayo, a lot of 1-year guys, 2-year guys. It's hard to get 2,500 yards in 2 years. Even though as great as our offenses have been and some of the quarterbacks they've had, it's still hard to get that because you're spreading the ball so much around. But Kwan's one of those guys. In that list, it's head and shoulders him in terms of yards per catch. He's around 20. Everyone else on that list is around like 15, 14, something like that. So it tells you his big play ability, not just once or twice, but throughout his entire career. It's something that he can be proud of, even if that record would only stand for 1 year.
Yeah, he's not one of the receivers that's going to take a little screen pass. He's going to go vertical and go down the field. And it seems like ever since he was a freshman making big plays, I still remember the catch he made at Kutztown at the end of the game. And that was a really big game at the beginning of the year. Kutztown was coming off a great year. California was, I believe, coming off a playoff appearance, or that was last year that they were in the playoffs. But you know, big plays for his entire career.
That's one of those things that's nice to see, too. He's one of those guys who's a fifth-year senior. I think there was 9 seniors this year, and I think 4 or 5 are fifth-year seniors. So it's nice to see those kind of guys graduating. They seem like they've been here a while, but they're also earning at least 1 degree, maybe even 2 degrees for some of them. So that's good to see, especially after you hear some of those things of like some schools are 1-year guys and that's it. There's only 2 guys in this program that are here 1 year, and both of those guys, they're getting a degree at the same time.
And on the other end, on the Lock Haven end, we were talking about the seniors right now for California. This is the last time the Lock Haven seniors are going to play at home. And when we're looking at some of the results Lock Haven had over the year, their team, their record's pretty bad. I think 2 wins. But they've been in a lot of games. They reminded me a little bit about Seton Hill. And we saw Seton Hill give California a little bit of pressure. So this is a game California really can't look past. We'll see in a couple minutes with the standings that there's a lot on the line. But if you think it's going to be a 50-0 blowout, I mean, that might not be the result.
And this is a building block, too, opportunity for a first-year head coach to really end the season on a high note, even if it's not a victory. It's just to play a high-quality opponent tough at home on your last senior day. That's something you can build as a head coach on into the spring brawl, and then use into recruiting and going into next season even.
And let's take a look, because we have about 8, 9, 10 minutes left in the show, and there's a lot to talk about in terms of standings, rankings, and all that stuff. So let's go ahead and put a bow on the final week of divisional play in the PSAC and look back at the scores and results for last weekend, starting with the PSAC West. You see California Mercers 31-21. Seton Hill beating Edinburgh. Edinburgh still winless on the year 44-23, and I thought that was a game that maybe Edinburgh could get on the right side of the ledger.
That's one of those things. Seton Hill's offense scoring 44 points. Edinburgh's, I think, with a backup quarterback that game, so there's going to be odds against them anyways. But you throw it going on the road with the backup QB, you don't really like those chances.
And then you see Slippery Rock taking Clarion to the woodshed 65-13. And that was a result I think we all kind of saw coming. I mean, Clarion, great turnaround, but we saw what happened when they faced the meat of the PSAC with California, Indiana, and Slippery Rock.
Great start to the year going 7-0, but again, those 7 wins, if you look at the time, those teams they had only had, I think, had 9 wins. And they even have a tough opponent this week, too, so it'd be really painful for Clarion to have all that success early, win 7 straight, then lose 4 straight at the end of the year. But we'll take a look at that opponent here in a little bit.
And the final game in the PSAC West on Saturday, Gannon IEP. And Gannon hung in that game tough for a long time before IEP scored at the end of the game to kind of make it look a little more lopsided than what it was, even though it was only a 12-point game. But that was a game that I think we were all watching the scores come up. That Gannon could was prized to pull the upset with a backup quarterback.
That's the thing, too. Nadler was out for the first time in 5 years. He didn't start a game, basically. So, I mean, that tells you how dominant and impressive he's been durability-wise. But Indiana, they did what they needed to do. With Williams and Temple, the run game, you know what they're going to do on the ground. So, big win for them.
Now let's look at the PSAC East. East Stroudsburg coming up a little short against Westchester. Westchester, as we'll see in the standings a little bit, really came on strong at the end of the season and did what they had to do towards the end of the season. Millersville getting their first win of the year, 26-6 over Cheney in a battle of teams that came into that game and combined 0 if I can do the math, 0-18?
Sounds about right.
Okay, we'll go with that. 0-2015, we can say that. But congratulations, Millersville. Had a little bit of an embarrassing loss to start the season against a D3 program, so good for them to get their first win of the year.
It's one of those things there. It's one of those things. You need the building block game. You're looking to the next year to see, okay, which team at least gets that win to say, okay, we got to win late in the season. We're building something here.
In a shootout, Kutztown shocking Shippensburg. Shippensburg basically had to win that game to represent the PSAC East in the conference championship game this coming weekend in Kutztown. Second, it seems like every year Kutztown's going to have a couple wins like that. They beat IEP earlier in the year, and right now, they pretty much ended Shippensburg's year.
Yeah, Shippensburg, if they win that game, they're odds-on favorite going into the East, and if they would be able to pull the upset in the championship game, they might have snuck themselves into the regional discussion and possibly in the playoffs. So this one really is going to sting, I think, with the Red Raiders there for a while.
And the final game, and this is a game that was decided in overtime. This week's opponent, Lock Haven, against Bloomsburg.
Double OT. That's a game there. Look at that score. Vulcans can't take them lightly now.
And I think Bloomsburg, Lock Haven had been on ungodly amount of years losing streak to Bloomsburg, so that was one that they really wanted to have. But again, when those scores were coming in, that was one of those ones you couldn't look away from your phone and see as soon as the updates came in.
I mean, Bloomsburg had such a run of all these seasons of at least 7-8 wins in a row. If they would have lost that game, it might have been all turmoil up there with the Huskies.
And let's take a look at the standings, the way everything finished out for the divisional play. Slippery Rock will be the West representative in the state championship game this Saturday. Them and IEP finished tied to top the West, 6-1 IEP, or Slippery Rock gets the tiebreaker in terms of beating Indiana a couple weeks ago. Basically, Indiana special teams let them down, a couple missed extra points, or else it could have been IEP playing in that game.
It's the same thing that happened with Slippery Rock with Seton Hill. They'd be around the table undefeated at 10-0 right now. I mean, you look now at the standings at the end of the year. Slippery Rock lost to Seton Hill, you're like, that can't be. But when they missed all those extra points and field goals at the end, that game really could have hurt Slippery Rock there. They could be looking probably a number 1 seed in the regional playoffs and top 5 probably in the country if they were undefeated right now.
And look at just the how dominant and how good the PSAC West was this year. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams at least 500 out of 8, and that's a tough division.
And
of
your
football.
team that's 4 games under beats your first place team. So
Yeah.
I mean that just tells you how close that is. In Edinburgh 0-7, I mean 0-10 overall. There were some close games there, and they're definitely not. That's not going to be something that continues. That's definitely one of those fluke kind of seasons for the Fighting Scots.
And going over to the PSAC East, and right there you see it, Westchester running the table at the end of the season. A couple weeks ago they were in the middle of the pack, but they come on strong at the last 3 or 4 weeks of the season. Finished 6-1 in the PSAC East.
Could have been a 5-way tie there for first place. There were some rumors going around what the conference office may do because all the tiebreakers of a 5-way tie are out the window. It could have been literally basically a ping pong ball.
Got to go coin flip, just like Friday Night Lights. Meet somewhere in the state at a diner, flip a coin. But Westchester, for better or for worse, denied us that treat to see what would have happened. See there, 1, 2, 3 teams, 5-2. And East Stroudsburg right there, 4-3.
I mean, their quarterback had such the potential there. I mean, with 5-5, they could easily got another 2 or 3 wins with his potential is there. He's a Harlan Hill guy, almost guaranteed lock for that. And even Kutztown, 6-4 overall, but they won when it counted. 5 wins in divisional play, and only a couple of losses there, probably to the tougher teams. But still being able to upset Shippensburg was a huge win for them.
That's why, I mean, PSAC is so tough as in a conference as a whole because you look, I mean, Lock Haven, Millersville, Cheney, and Edinburgh did not have great years, but you take those 4 teams out, and there's a lot of talent on those
It's a
remaining
16
teams.
team league. I mean, you're going to have a couple ones in there. You probably be like, okay, you can cancel them out. But to have 3/4 of your league probably be challenging for something in the last week of the year, that's something to be proud of there for a conference and even the conference office and every team in the league.
And now what I think everyone's been waiting for, the newest Super Region 1 rankings that came out yesterday. And let's go through them because there's all kinds of stuff. Shepherd, 9-0. I mean, no argument there. They're probably the cream of the crop right now.
Facing Urbana, that's a team on paper you probably think they would win, so they finish the year 10-0 and probably run the table because they've been 1 all year in the region. They'd probably be the 1 seed and get that bye.
Now the number 2 team, Bowie State, 9-0 right now. But as is tradition for the CIAA in every major sport, it seems for the past 3 or 4 years, there's eligibility issues. And the CIAA has ruled one way. The NCAA, of course, will not rule on anything because, I don't know. I would think, here's what gets me mad. And I know everyone gets frustrated about this. If you have an eligible player, at least make a ruling. Say this is what's going to happen because now you got 8 or 9 teams below you that really don't know what's going to happen. I mean, it's just come out with a statement saying this is what is probably going to happen. Don't be like, oh, we're going to wait until Sunday night when the selection happens to apply penalties.
I mean, that's basically what happened come March when we saw it with women's basketball. Livingstone ran the table, CIAA going to win the whole thing basically, and then they lose in their conference semifinals, I believe it was. But they were still listed number 1 in the region.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, what the heck's going on? They had an ineligible player all year, not like Bowie State, who at least sat there an ineligible player. But they kept playing her, and at the end of the year, they weren't even in the rankings at all. They weren't even top 10, and they didn't make an appearance here in Hammer Hall for the playoffs. So, but this was a nullification. Those were forfeits. You tell me the difference. I don't know. There's some schools are putting out there some mathematical formulas they've somehow found on the NCAA website. But again, this is all just guesswork at this point with Bowie State. What's going to happen there?
It's just so frustrating. Like I said, women's basketball last year, I think 2 years ago, before that, women's basketball, Shaw had the same issue.
Shaw won the national title and had an ineligible player.
So it's like, I mean, maybe next year we get
Winston-Salem-
get Ben Roethlisberger to play a couple
Winston-Salem's had
games.
issues in the past with football, so I mean, it's one of those things. It doesn't go away. You just, as a coach and fans, it's just basically one of those things you have to live with.
But on the good news, as you see down at number 8, California, just outside the top 7 this year. Of course, the top 7 teams make it. The number 1 team will get a bye, and then 2 will play 7, 3 will play 6, 4 will play 5. And then New Haven, Glenville State lurking right there. Now let's look at the key matchups this week. We went ahead and looked what's going on. Top game right there is the PSAC championship game, Slippery Rock at Westchester. You got to think, Matt, Slippery Rock is probably in regardless
They're
of
probably
win
in
or loss.
regardless what happens there. Westchester is one of those teams, if they would happen to get that win and basically be an upset, even though it's at their home field, they're not in the top 10, but you and I have been around this long enough. The NCAA does not take a PSAC East team. It'd be hard if they had 4 losses, but if they only have 3 and one a huge win in Slippery Rock, and the way they finished the year, I could easily see something like that happening.
They would almost have to move to the head of the line. They're the 3 lost teams because Slippery Rock has been, except for that one blip against Seton Hill, they've been probably, if not the best team, second best team in the Super Region. Cheney at Indiana, that's not a misprint. Most of the PSAC West teams are playing the East, but Cheney having some issues, has to play at Indiana this week. So you would think Indiana is going to hold serve.
You would think so, but also with them, now they've played Cheney and they've played Edinboro, 2 teams that have combined no wins right now, and they played 1 less game than everybody else. But given how they've played, their track record, their star power at quarterback and running back, I think they're probably going to be in because Vegas doesn't have a line far enough for Indiana to be losing that game.
And then you have our game, California at Lock Haven. You got to feel good about California's chances against Lock Haven. Traditionally, Lock Haven's had a down year. Hopefully California can take care of business and beat Lock Haven. And then here we go, Winston-Salem at Bowie State in the CIAA championship game. Winston-Salem this year is 5-5. You would think Bowie State would probably be the odds-on favorite to win that game, but again, if they win, who knows what that means, because NCAA could say nullification, nullification, nullification.
If Winston-Salem would win, you would think that opens the door clearly for Virginia Union to make the CIAA's basically birth into the NCAA playoffs, but Bowie State got to put question marks all around that team.
Urbana at Shepherd. Urbana not having a great year, so you would think Shepherd, unless they get lost to Ram Stadium, will probably win that game. Charleston, again, UVA-wise not having the greatest of season. You would think Charleston's going to hold serve. And then the other game that's probably going to hold the most amount of weight about what happens in California, New Haven and Assumption, Northeast 10 championship game. Assumption, 8-1 or 9-1 coming into this game. New Haven was right behind California. You would think if Assumption wins, that would eliminate New Haven, but if New Haven were to pull
it keeps it close, even if it's even a close game. You look at strength of schedule the last week of the year, you're playing a conference title team against a team that's won 2 games. And again, any 10 getting 2 teams, it's a nice story for the NCAA. It doesn't typically happen. You don't want to load up the PSAC with 3 teams in the West and none in the East. So there's a lot of different scenarios to be playing out on Saturday afternoon.
And New Haven, an interesting story. They're a team that dropped football for about a decade in the late 80s, or between the 90s and early 2000s, or mid-2000s. Restarted their program a few years ago and have had pretty good success since they came back. The other game matching a top 10 Super Region game would be Glenville State hosting Fairmont State on Thursday night. Fairmont State, decent team. That's a decent rivalry game. We've been to Glenville State a few times. It's a tough place to play. So
Glenville's got to make up so much ground. They would have to have a ton of things happen to go their way to get in. But we've seen strange things happen before.
And Virginia Union is off, so they can't lose. So
if they were lost last week to Virginia State, that could have really opened the door for Cal to be probably a 7 right now and sitting pretty going into the last week of the year. But they were able to hold off that win over the one common opponent the 2 teams would have. So credit for Virginia Union when they needed to.
So basically, when you're at Hubert Jack Stadium or listening to the game on 91.9 FM, WCAL this Saturday at 1 o'clock, the Vulcans will make the trip to Lock Haven. Keep checking your phone because there's going to be scores. All of those games are between noon and 1 and 2. We didn't get to the PSAC schedule, but most of those games are between noon, 1 and 2. So everything's going to be happening at the same time. And if you don't want to waste your data while you're sitting in the stands, just keep checking at calvulcans.com because I'm sure, Matt, you'll have updates as they become available because the selection for the NCAA playoffs will be Sunday, and I'm sure you'll have something immediately one way or the other.
It's going to be a crazy weekend. We have volleyball senior day at home, football away, and basketball's tipping off Saturday and Sunday. So then we're going to have 4 events on Saturday, then go to selection day Sunday, and then 2 basketball games. So it's going to be quite interesting. Both of us, West Liberty on Sunday. Their men are top 5 in their country, and the women, we both saw that game in the regional playoffs. It's one of the best teams in the region, so it's going to be a great game.
It's a great time to be a sports fan because we're at that. It's crazy time of year because there's like 9 sports going on. But like I said, if you're a sports fan, it's a great time because you got basketball starting, got the playoff season of football coming up. So there's a lot of ways to stay in touch with California Vulcans football and all athletics. calvulcans.com. And like I said, this Saturday, CUTV and WCAO will be making the trip to Lock Haven. So keep checking in, and hopefully we'll be talking next week about a possible first-round NCAA playoff game. So for Matt Keifer, I'm Gary Smith. You've been watching Vulcans Football 2015 right here on CUTV.